Well, I would like to return to the election now because that made me think of this. Taiwan voted for William Lai and his DPP party, and that's kind of taken as a clear sign that the Taiwanese people are not interested in closer relations with the PRC. However, the DPP did lose its majority in the parliament. KMT and TPP both got more seats. What's going on there? Because that seems to be kind of sending the opposite message. Why did so many Taiwanese people vote that way in the parliament?
Well, that's how China spun it, in fact. After the results, they said, well, look, a majority of people uh, didn't vote for the DPP. Therefore, they really do love the Chinese or the Chinese communists. Well, not so fast. That's how politicians of all stripes will spin it. But many people, and I'll take the TPP, which is sort of a newish third party. A lot of their voters are younger people, and they voted for somebody other than the DPP, and often vote because they see corruption in government. They see government doesn't seem to work all that well, and their economic conditions haven't really gotten all that much better during the DPP administrations. And so they think, well, we're going to vote for somebody else. And the TPP presents itself as a newish party that actually will look after those people's interests. So it attracted a pretty good size of 28%. It was a fair number of voters, and that. But the vote was not sort of a pro PRC vote. It was as much just let's try something different and see how it goes. Within the KMT itself, that's where you're going to find the real sort of soft on China people. But even within the KMT, there's a lot of people who don't want to be part of the PRC. So the voting is, as I said, is often done on economic grounds, people's personal situation. And probably the true figure of people who sort of voted against the PRC in this election would be well over 60%, I think one would fairly argue. And as time goes on, the KMT's support base is often a lot of older people. And just the nature of things, as time goes on, these older people move on to other pastures. And you're not going to have as many pro-PRC people in Taiwan. China and Taiwan are on diverging tangents. And Taiwan is not getting any closer to the PRC, and it's just getting farther away from it. But as I say, that third party, particularly the TPP, if you read that carefully, that it's not, I think most of those people, when it comes to do the relationships with China, would be closer to the DPP than they would to anything else.
So when it comes to the presidential election, a lot of people look at it like it's like a Ross Perot situation where this third party suddenly comes in and then splits the vote between the two major parties, but the split is uneven. So essentially, the result is they sabotage one party and help the other party. Do you think that if the TPP were not involved in this election, that we would have still seen a majority support for the DPP, specifically because you mentioned a lot of people's anti-PRC stance?
I think it would have been closer. I can at least say that, in terms of who would have won, I don't know. I just don't know about that. But one thing that's an interesting sort of development during the election campaign was that the TPP and the KMT, and once again, the KMT is the pretty soft on China party, and the TPP is that third party. They tried to present a unity ticket, which means that their top guy the top guy in each party was going to be sort of run as president and vice president candidates. They couldn't decide on who was going to be the top dog. And as a result, that broke up. And it was like apparently on live TV when they realized that this wasn't going to happen. And that turned a lot of people off, apparently. But that whole thing, it was apparently arranged by the Chinese communists. That there's what I consider compelling circumstantial evidence to suggest that China was actually trying to dictate that. And the KMT are the ones who really thought this was a splendid idea, less so the TPP. And the communists even got a fourth candidate, Terry Goh, the head of Foxconn, that he was going to run, and they actually encouraged him not to run by investigating his companies in China. So you had the communists successfully exerting their influence within the Taiwanese electoral system, almost to determine who was going to be the candidates. As I said, so this was something that got a lot of attention, and it certainly was interesting. If those two parties had run together, I think they would have won.
What is that evidence that you see that the CCP may have been behind that unity ticket idea?
There were some people from the KMT who went to China and had some meetings with Chinese officials. And it's not all that hard to figure out what happened. And former President Ma was throwing his weight around as well. It seems to be fairly sort of taken as something that did happen. And what happened to Terry Goh, that is pretty easy to figure out. There's been some people who've said that he is very close to the Chinese Communist Party to start with. Some have said that. But when it comes to the pressure they were applying on his companies, that was public knowledge. And shortly after, he decided politics wasn't his thing this year.
Do you think that the TPP side was aware of this intrigue between the KMT and the CCP?
I think so. It's one of my theories is that if I know something, I suspect that just about everyone else does too. But I would think that they did. But you just couldn't. You wondered how it was going to work, just because you don't get to be the top candidate of a party by having zero ego. And you were just waiting to see, okay, who's going to go first, or say I'll go second. That just doesn't seem to happen all that often. But there was that problem too, that when the TPP saw that it might have to play second fiddle to the KMT, that they were starting to get so much pressure and trouble from their own supporters that I think they backed off pretty quickly.
Well, you basically have two men with big egos who have to decide like which one of them is going to be the alpha, and they both want to be the alpha, right? So
I mean,
there's just
especially wen-je, the TPP candidate, basically built the TPP party, right?
Right.
He founded the Taiwan People's Party essentially in large part so he could run for president.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's his baby. He's not going to give it up.
Yeah, I mean, two men with power and ego, and Tsai Ing-wen is just this woman in the middle trying to. I feel like that I can relate to this situation somehow.
That analogy would work better if William Lai was.
Well, I know that's why I had to go back to
Tsai Ing-wen.
It didn't go great.
Well, he's got Xiao Bi Kim.
So you mentioned the election interference, and it's transparent. There's a variety of ways the CCP tried to influence this election that they had a pretty big stake in. You also mentioned that, there is this election coming up in the U.S. this year that a lot is riding on for China as well. Is there any sense that the Chinese Communist Party is going to try to influence the election in some way? I'm trying to phrase this in a way that won't get YouTube to cancel the show.
I mean, I don't think so, Chris. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, I doubt they will, but if they did, they'd perhaps do something like support some of these groups that were rioting back in 2020, like they just might have done. That's one thing. They've also got their friends on Wall Street and in the U.S. business class. You saw the two standing ovations that Xi Jinping got in San Francisco last November. Well, it shows you that they've got some friends who are influential, and it is that donor class which has a lot of influence in U.S. politics. Additionally,
I will say, though, that it does seem... You mentioned the Apex standing ovation. That was awful. But then you also see like guys like Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan saying, yeah, the China investment was not as good as I thought it was. You see a lot of Wall Street guys moving out of China. So is that really a faction the Chinese Communist Party can rely on anymore?
I think it still is. Jamie Dimon's always the head of JP Morgan. He's always sort of been willing to sort of speak up a bit, but when it suits his purposes. But I'm not sure that he's representative of everybody on Wall Street. I think they've got a ways to go before they get that 2x4, on the side of the head and wake up. I'm not sure that, say, they've completely woken up just yet. In the U.S. business class as well, there's 2 standing ovations, and it was that said plenty. So I think they still have plenty of friends in Wall Street, on Wall Street, the business class as well, but also in the political class. There's you see all sorts of people who are saying, "Don't provoke China. Keep the status quo. Let's engage. We have to talk with them. We have to, understand things. We're having financial talks going on between our financial officials and theirs, presumably to help the Chinese out of their financial mess." The U.S. military has been keen to engage with the Chinese. You even had the Secretary of State say the other day, "Well, China's helping us out with fentanyl. They're going after the people who are exporting it to America." I used to be a lawyer, and you'd love to have a sort of a witness on the stand. You'd ask him, "Well, were you lying then, or are you lying now?" He couldn't possibly believe this, but you have people saying this. So there is these are sort of proxies. They can be second or third level proxies, but they're effectively saying, let's not challenge the Chinese. And this other candidate who's coming, who knows what he would do. So that's one form of influence. But also you do have, academia, which is a lot of people who are very supportive of the PRC in it. Obviously the use of TikTok, social media to pass messages, disinformation, to attack the people's minds. This cognitive warfare, the Chinese are very good at it. When the TikTok CEO testified before Congress some months back, it was his testimony wasn't a surprise, but what was most interesting was that phalanx of Americans, lawyers and lobbyists behind him, just lined up in a row. And those are the guys who are doing China's bidding. To make sure that TikTok has free access to American minds. If the price is right, I think there's a certain type of American who will do all sorts of things and convince himself that it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, TikTok really is scary because a lot of young people, that's their primary source of news and information. And it's controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. That's not good.
I remember how there were complaints from mainstream media back 20 years ago that young people were watching The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, and that's where they were getting their news from. And there was this real concern, oh, this is so terrible that they're getting their news from there. And it is in hindsight, that was so much better than TikTok, right?